Greetings everyone. In this video I'm going to cover some basic subqueries. This will be an introduction. It's a really important topic because we use those in problem solving all the time, and they're a fundamental construct in SQL. So the first subquery I'm going to do is using the in operator. And the second one will be using the equals, and I'll try to describe the difference between the in and the equals. Then the third subquery, probably the more complex of the three, uses an aggregate. And it will be a question where you have to use a subquery. So that leads me to the point that for some problems you could solve either with a subquery or you could solve it with a join. But then you get to some problems, it has to be just a join or it has to be just a subquery. So we have to have some strong skills in both of those. So let's go to our first subquery. And here's the full query here at the top. And it's select distinct ticker symbol from stock data where ticker symbol in, and the inner query, which is why it's called a subquery, we say select ticker symbol from the company information table where the state's California. So that's this part of the subquery. So if I execute just this part of the subquery, we'll get a list of ticker symbols that are from the state of California. Well, that turns out to be really cool. That gives me the list of ticker symbols, but what I really wanted returned was something else. Let's go back up to our entire query, and what I wanted to do is list the ticker symbols from stock data for those instances where the state was California. So we highlight the whole thing, we only want to see each one once, and we run it, and indeed we'll get a list of ticker symbols here, just one. Notice that we used an in clause, and the in clause allows for a list. So the subquery can generate a whole list of ticker symbols. That list is returned to the outer query, and then the outer query is going to give what we display. So in will take an entire list. We'll contrast that in a moment to the equals. And let's do the second part. And this will be a subquery with an equals. Now I mentioned before that when you have an in, it can return a list. In this example, we use an equals, and an equals allows only for one value. So here I want to give a ticker symbol and a trade date for those times that it's the year 2019, the month is February, and the day is 28th. So what happens is the inner part of a subquery, that executes first, and then it feeds its answer to the outer part of the query. So it executes in the order of inner to outer. In this case, it'll look for actual dates that are 2019, February 28th. So let's run the query. And really what we're looking for is ticker symbols and the trade date for anything that was traded on February 28, 2019. And I need to make my answer a little larger here, so we'll scroll the screen up. And notice virtually every stock in our database was traded on February 28, 2019, so it was listed. But there are no other dates listed. And so we feel like, or we see that our subquery worked. Again, equals can return one value, whereas in can return a list of values. Okay, let's pivot hard, and we're going to use a subquery in a situation that you can't use any other constructs to get the answer. What we're looking for with this query is ticker symbols that have a closing price that traded higher than the average closing price. So the inner part of the query, or the subquery here, calculates the average closing price for all stocks for all days in the entire stock data table. Then the outer part of the query says, give me the ticker symbol for stocks whose closing price traded higher than the average. Let's look at ticker symbols that traded higher than the average. We'll notice that there's 73 rows. So 73 of the 100 stocks traded higher than average. Average is kind of a weird thing because stocks can be all over the map. They can trade from $1,000 a share to just a few pennies a share. But we see here that there's 73 stocks that trade higher than the average. Now, a lot of students, if they're not familiar with SQL, what they want to say is they want to put where the closing price is greater than the average closing price. They want to do something like that. And you can't. You can't put an aggregate in a where clause. It's a rule. And if you kind of think about it, it wouldn't make any sense because the first part of the where clause would be a row and the second part of the where clause would be an average over a lot of rows, and so it's nonsensical. So to get around the rule that says we can have no aggregates in the where clause, we build a subquery. And the subquery can calculate the average and feed it to the where clause. And I kind of like that because I've always been one that said, if there's a rule, I want to find a way around the rule. So having a subquery to calculate an aggregate is allowing us to get around a rule. I always like that. Okay, so that is a basic introduction to a few subqueries. In a future video, we'll have some more complex subqueries, but it's an important construct to build a lot of skill on. Thank you.